Bones feels like his neck's in a sling. The Enterprise has 114 delegates on board for 2 weeks, and the Vulcan salute hurts Bones more than the uniform. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 10, Journey to Babel, written by the legendary D.C. Fontana, directed by Joseph Pivney. This was November 17th, 1967. Where were you? And how you guys doing today, Sirach and Walter?
I'm doing great.
What did you say? Oh, how are we doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Some people say this is like a Thanksgiving episode because it aired on November 17th, right before Thanksgiving. It's an episode about family. There's a lot of food at the table. You know, there's a bunch of strangers that you maybe like or don't like. You know, it's a Thanksgiving episode. Did you guys get that vibe?
I did not.
Absolutely not.
I did not get Thanksgiving at all.
I mean, there's a murder. There's an enormous emotional conflict on the part of our principal character. There's a ship pursuing the Enterprise. None of that sounds like Thanksgiving to me.
Maybe not yours, but mine are pretty exciting.
Okay.
Yeah. What it did remind me of is what we see in Star Trek, you know, oftentimes, which is some kind of delegation or some kind of gathering of groups to make a peace treaty or negotiate some kind of deal. So that was more familiar to me in that sense, like this peace delegation, this, you know, sit down for a treaty type moment.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Walter. You had a pretty big role in this. I saw no Scotty, and I saw no Sulu. So the 7 leads were down to 5, and if you recall, Walter, you actually had the bridge several times. They put you in charge. Do you remember any of this?
When I get up from my navigation console and I walk to this other station, that's a science station, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm reading something off a science console.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the way, it's interesting. 2 things that are not to do with story, but they're kind of curious. One, you're right, there is no Scotty, but you hear his voice.
Oh, did we? I missed
Kirk
that.
talks to him in engineering. Kirk talks to him for a moment in engineering, and you hear the Scottish accent. Whether they used his voice or whether they got just somebody to do the 2 lines is moot. I have no idea.
Okay.
And the other thing that is interesting, we
lost them.
Drat. Well, we'll find out what that other interesting thing was in a moment. But Sirach, this is your first time watching this episode. It's my first time watching this episode. I got a lot of thoughts on this one, but what do you think?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts as well. First, I thought that, you know, just overall, the language, the diplomacy, the costuming, all of it was big, and I thought it was well written on the part of DC Fontana's. Mm-hmm. She was able to voice a lot of people's characters, you know, not with the same voice. And so I felt each character spoke with their own voice and had their own kind of identity. So that was a good thing. I felt the writing was, you know, delicious in that type of way. Also happy to see Spock's dad. I thought the actor who played Ambassador Sarek was right on the money.
Mark Leonard.
As far as Mark Leonard. Yeah, I thought he was right on the money as far as the composure, the demeanor, the tension between him and Spock. All of that was well played, in my opinion. And then even when they get along, they still have that kind of tension between each other. So it's interesting to watch this Vulcan father son relationship.
And we saw Mark Leonard later on in The Next Generation, if you'll recall, when he had Bendai syndrome and he was crying and going like, illogical, illogical, which was, but this,
he's a great actor.
He's amazing. And so clearly this is when his character was first introduced, and Spock drops the bomb of, this is my family. These are my parents. And we're like, what? But those of us that already saw The Next Generation, we knew that already. We're like, oh, that's Spock's dad.
Yeah, even I was kind of surprised about it. So I was one of those, what guys, even though I recognize his face, a lot of times we have actors that are, cast multiple times in different episodes playing different aliens. And so, the first thought was, oh, I've seen his face before, but I wasn't quite sure that was Spock's dad until he revealed it. And then I had okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, this is tracking. So that I enjoyed as well. I noticed the upgraded visual effects of the shuttlecraft kind of moving about the hangar and whatnot. I definitely recognized that it felt like there was an upgrade to that whole sequencing, for visual effects purposes.
Also, there was a moment when Uhura was on the intercom.
Okay.
And I was like, like usually when they do the intercom, it's just auditory. It's just audible. And I was wondering if they added that recently or if that was just a bit of VFX, post budget that they had where they're like, hey, let's add her face, because they didn't do that later for Chekhov. They only did it that one time for Uhura that I saw. And I didn't know they'd ever done that before. So I'm assuming this wasn't a new thing that they added. I'm assuming this is something that they always had, but I just never noticed. But that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. But some of the things that I did pick up on was, number one, in the opening, the dress uniforms. That's another kind of theme that we've seen carried on throughout Star Trek when some kind of ambassadors aborting the ship, or there's some kind of delegation or some kind of, negotiations being done. We see the implementation of the dress uniforms, which I think is great. It's a tradition in the military. It's also a tradition here in Star Trek. So watching that is, it's just a special thing to see. Plus, we talked about it before, but the insignias that were on the outfits themselves, there was no Delta on there. There was no Starfleet kind of official insignia. It was those triangles and colorful medallions that you see on their uniforms.
Right. And we saw that again more recently on Strange New Worlds. If you recall, like there was a moment where they had the dress uniforms and some delegation, and they had that really colorful thing. I wonder if I can pull that up. But that was really cool. And so, but then after that, still Kirk was in his green uniform, which is, I feel like he's only in that green uniform a couple times.
Yeah, and I noticed that Spock had transitioned back into his original, his normal Starfleet stuff, and so did McCoy, but Kirk remained in the dress uniform for a longer period of time while he was escorting them around. So I thought that was also, I picked up on that as well.
Yeah, so check this out here. This is Strange New Worlds.
Okay, yeah.
You remember that, right?
Yeah. And so I don't know, you don't see that popularized as much when you go to the conventions and you see people cosplaying. You don't really see a whole bunch of those, old school dress uniform kind of medallions that they used to wear to signify some difference. But I thought this episode carried a lot of those kinds of themes where you see the stuff that has been set precedent for the, those dress uniforms, also the themes, the theme of using biblical kind of names and nomenclature. So I felt like hearing the title Journey to Babel was essentially setting me up mentally for a certain kind of biblical theme. We've seen Babel also being used again in Deep Space Nine, but when I hear Journey to Babel, I'm thinking, oh, okay, another usage of biblical theme in Star Trek, which is something that we've seen throughout all of the shows. And that's one of the things that resonated for me while I was watching this episode was, what are the themes that have become essentially baseline building block material for Star Trek? Like, the title names, for example, the dress uniforms, even something like solving a murder mystery. Something like murder mysteries. This is something that is like recycled thematically on Star Trek. So when I see it, I think to myself about how these episodes essentially were the origin of those kinds of concepts and of them being used. So when I see murder mystery themes, when I see borrowing of biblical, you know, names or references, I think of all of the check marks that Star Trek goes through when they make these kinds of episodes. This is the precedent that has been set. Babel, the dress uniforms, the theme of a murder mystery on board ship or the station and trying to solve it. We keep seeing these things recycled throughout Star Trek, and you get to see the origin of it here.
Yeah, when Walter jumps back on, we're going to ask him if they on set pronounced it Babel or Babel, because I was always calling it Babel. You're calling it Babel. When I looked it up to find out what the correct pronunciation was, it said in American English, it's pronounced Babel. In British English, it's called Babel. So I was calling it Babel. I was like, okay, that confirms it, Babel. But then in the episode, when they mentioned it the one time, they called it Babel. I'm like, you guys, come on, you're killing me. It's kind of like that Adonias, Adonad. It's you guys got to keep it simple for us, please. Use words that there's only one pronunciation so that we know that we're saying it correctly. But anyway, one thing I really did like, and I always like this about Star Trek episodes, is when we see a bunch of different races. We got to see the Tellarites. And I love Tellarites, these pig-looking fellas. I love Jankum Pog in Prodigy is a Tellarite.
Yes.
And there have been a lot. There were some characters in Enterprise. There was a lot of Tellarite presence in Enterprise Season 4. So I like these guys a lot. And I feel like this is a race that was never examined enough. It's a real bummer because there are 4 founding members of the Federation: humans, Vulcans, Andorians, and Tellarites. And humans and Vulcans obviously get a ton of time. Andorians get quite a bit. Jeffrey Combs plays an Andorian in Enterprise, and he gets a lot of burn as Shran the Andorian. Tellarites get a few episodes, but really, I guess until Jankum Pog, there's never really been a Tellarite character. But when I see them, I get excited. And so that's really cool. Actually, Jason Alexander plays Dr. Noam in Prodigy, the older Tellarite. But anyway, did you have any thoughts on all these aliens? Because there's a bunch of them.
I had to draw one of my Tellarite right here. Let's see, where is it?
Oh yeah, I see him on the left. It's a little blurred.
Sorry.
Love those guys.
Trying to get that range right. But anyways, yeah. The pig face guys with recessed eyes, pig nostrils, very hairy, also 3 pig fingers and nail polish. I thought that was kind of cool. and their silvery outfits, their shivery, silvery baked potato outfits. I really like what I like them, and I actually wish we saw more of them, in Star Trek, because, like you said, we get to see a lot of other alien races get backstory and character development. We've seen, the Ferengi, we've seen other deep dives, and we just don't know that much about the Tellarites. Clearly, they're
this is them in Enterprise here. Pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I like those. I like the characters. Thought the makeup was great on them. Actually, made me think of bank robber outfits. Like, when you see bank robbers come in and they're wearing like a president face mask or some kind of, you know what I mean, some weird mask or something, and you see those in the movies. I was thinking, if I were to rob a bank, I would wear a Tellarite. It's like a perfect, almost spooky. It's kind of spooky, kind of scary. Haven't seen that many, Tellarites at conventions, to be honest with you. Cosplay.
And that's a bummer. There should be, and speaking of bank robbers, you go up to the bank teller, right? When you, if you want to get money, you go up to the bank teller, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We always can squeeze one of those in.
Yeah. But no, you're right. I never, ever see Tellarites cosplayed. We see Andorians all the time. We see humans all the time and Vulcans, but we never, that's what I'm saying. Tellarites don't get enough love.
And what I was looking at when I was watching them was really considering, that's a fantastic makeup job. The way they recessed the eyes in.
For the 60s, yeah.
Yeah, there has to be some kind of space there in order for that to happen. So you're creating this latex kind of overlay on top of the nose ridge and eye area in order to make the eyes look sunken in like that. So you could barely see the Tellarite's eyes, even though I knew deep down every once in a while you could see the eyeball down there, but it was as if their eyes were sunken in. I thought that was a fantastic makeup application, especially for that time period. But even today's time period, it would still be remarkable to see that kind of, the way they built up the face in order to sink back the eyes. I thought that was great.
I actually played a Tellarite once with Dr. Trek Larry Nemeczek in that fan film series called Star Trek Continues. And we played Tellarites, and we were and a third guy, Kevin Fry Bowers, an actor. The three of us played these Tellarite thugs that were hauling some Orion girl. And, it was just kind of a quick thing, but it was a lot of fun. And that was a long time ago, but I remember we kind of wore that baked potato outfit that you're talking about there. Now, Walter says he can hear us, but we can't hear him, evidently, and we can't see him, but he is on the Zoom and he can hear us. So I don't know how to fix that. I think what we'll do is we'll take a quick break and we'll jump back on. We'll have the tech figured out. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig.
Hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week, of the episode, I should say. Bones feels like his neck's in a sling. The Enterprise has 114 delegates on board for 2 weeks. The Vulcan salute hurts Bones more than the uniform. Human smile with so little provocation. Sarek gave Spock his first instruction in computers. Starfleet is an instrument of civilization. Tellarites do not argue for reasons. They simply argue. Spock has a pet Selah he was very fond of. A vessel flies by the Enterprise at warp 10. Threats are illogical and payment is usually expensive. That's a good one. Sarek has a malfunction in one of his heart valves. Captain Kirk wants to get his hands on the guy with the sledgehammer. Okay. Oh, and also before we forget everybody, we'd like to give a very special thanks to Ria Papagiorgio for sponsoring this episode. Our favorite Greek person, Rhea Papageorgiou. She's like, if I'm your favorite, you better pronounce my last name right. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we did. Thank you so much to our good friend, Rhea. All right, so back to this episode. Walter, we didn't get too much of what you thought in the first segment. What'd you think of this one?
What did I think of this one?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, sir.
Well, I feel that we've already covered a very a very significant conflict in one of the other episodes that we've watched. And that is an episode where Spock has to make a decision between where his allegiance lies. Does it lie with the Enterprise, or does it lie with his own flesh and blood? Am I wrong? Did we not have an episode where that was also a prominent point of discussion?
It's kind of a common theme with Spock, and it's also kind of like, will he ever admit that he's fond of Kirk, like that they're friends? Will he ever admit that he has a human side? And this is kind of along that theme where now his allegiance is, tested.
Well, I think it's a valuable conflict. I think it's one we can explore, and that is his loyalty to his ship or is to his father. That's a big decision to make, and I think they acquitted themselves well enough in resolving it. In order for it to be resolved, Kirk has to be hurt. He has to have been injured, so that Spock initially becomes the head of the ship, becomes the top guy, because Kirk has to be in sickbay. And then Kirk does his heroic thing. He climbs out of sickbay, even though he's been wounded, and takes over and tells Spock that he must have the blood transfusion to help his father. So it's a good conflict. It's a very strong, powerful decision that he has to make, and that is that at the focus of the story. That's the nucleus of the story, as far as I'm concerned. Once that is resolved, everything else kind of falls into place.
Yes.
The only thing is, go ahead. I was just going to say.
What were we going to say?
What? What's he doing?
He said, "What were you going to say, Walter? Go ahead."
That the fight that Kirk has, that poor man's gymnastics, where he tumbles and the other guy flips, and you only see the knife in the guy's hand after he stabbed him. You don't see him being stabbed. So we're taking at face value that he has been stabbed, and that's why he can't conduct business as captain. I would have liked to have seen a shot which was a little bit more threatening, where we see the knife. If you can put it into Kirk's back, then you have a dummy, or you have something where we get the sense that he is really badly injured, and it requires considerable heroic effort to climb out of sickbay and take over the ship and tell Spock that he has to help his father. I would have liked to have seen something just a little more graphic, I think.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I was looking for blood on Kirk's back or blood on the knife. Right. I didn't see either
immediately, and there was nothing there.
Yeah. They could have done a close up on Kirk's back, and you see his clothes ripped, and maybe a gash or a wound. Something there would have enhanced that scene, because it looked like two kids kind of like playing on the playground. It didn't look like life-threatening injury. But to speak to Walter's first point about the conflict that Spock is faced with between, captaining the ship versus, saving his father, I felt that it wasn't set up with enough emphasis on why he alone was capable of being the person who needed to captain the ship at that moment, because Vulcans who use logic as the fundamental decision making factor, I feel that in those two scenarios, in one case, Spock is the only person who can solve the problem. And in the other case, which is being the acting temporary captain, multiple people are qualified for that distinguished, to do that. So if you had to pick between a job where you're the only qualified person versus one in which there are several replacements, the logic would dictate you to pick the one in which you're the only one who can do the job.
A+ logic right there. Can't argue with that.
Yeah. I was interested to know about Walter. Joseph Pivney. I think you've mentioned working his work style before. Did anything jump out to you about some of the directing choices he made?
Well, the Vulcans have a electronic power. I mean, at one point, when the guy with the pig face, I don't know what race that is,
Tellarite.
when he grabs him, Sarek does something, and the guy goes flying backwards. Have we ever seen that before?
They're basically the Vulcans have superhuman strength, but it was just not choreographed very well, because what he did was he went like this, and the guy flew backwards. And so that was
like he was electrocuted or something.
Yeah, that was just 60s choreography, because he should have done something where he at least pushes them forward so that the guy can fly backwards. But instead, he does this move, and it just didn't look like it worked.
Which is a magic move, and magic is not part of the repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did look magical. So I guess now in these both instances, you're pointing out the poor choreography in some of the stunts coordinating in this episode. You're not that satisfied with it, and I agree that they could have done both of those scenes better. Both the fight scene with Kirk needed at least a little bit of coverage in it, and the fight scene with Sarek required some different motion, like a pushing motion, that would have validated this guy flying back into the wall. Just doing this, it looked like he was a blocking motion as opposed to a pushing motion. But I do want to highlight one shot that I thought the director did a good job on, and that is when the crew is getting ready to meet Ambassador and his wife coming off of the shuttlecraft. There is a lineup of all of these red-shirted Starfleet personnel lined up on the camera in the doorway. We saw Kirk on one side of the doorway and Spock and McCoy on the other side of the doorway. And in one shot, we were able to see both the people in the foreground, a hallway lined up of other Starfleet personnel, and watch as Ambassador Sarek and his wife came towards us. Thought it was a great shot.
Yeah,
it covered a lot of the the diplomacy of the welcoming of this, and the way it was framed. It got everybody in the shot at the same time. So I did like that shot.
Yeah, and I want to, just one final thought about the choreography, not to beat it to death, but Walter, in your experience, would you attribute that to people just saying, "Look, we got to make our day. We're late. We're running out of time"? Was it a budgetary thing? Was it not the attention to detail? Like in your experience, being on set all the time for a couple of years. What do you think the culprit was for something like that?
You're talking about the Kirk fight?
Yeah, like the choreography and not really having the attention to detail in the fights.
Well,
and
it was very simple. It was pretty simplistic, you know. There was just a couple of tumbles, and that was pretty much it. It was okay. Maybe, you know, we can excuse on the basis of when this was shot. You know, this was the '60s. Maybe that in some way influenced the complexity of the fight, which was not very complex. It was not very. It didn't seem like it was much of a fight. It was, you know, a couple of tumbles, and that was pretty much it. It didn't bother me much. I was aware of it. I was certainly aware of it. Yeah. It could have been more realistic. It could have been more something that involves us and brings home the point that Kirk has been severely wounded. I mean, I didn't see anything in the fight that indicated that, because we didn't see the knife penetrating or anything of that nature. So, for the purpose of putting Spock in charge, and Kirk not being able to command the Enterprise, it was lacking a little. It could have been a little bit more strenuous, a little bit more vicious or something. Yeah, so I was aware of it. I mean, I tended to excuse it, but I was aware of it.
Okay. Well, and I was hoping you could give us a little insight. Yeah. Go on.
I'd just like to say that I got to know Mark Leonard quite well. We did 4 plays together, 4 different plays over the course of the years. And we toured with a couple of them. We played Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, meeting 40 years later. And that was, yeah, and we got a really, really positive reception. And his daughter sent me a manuscript of biography that she wrote of his life, which I find quite interesting. I mean, he had an amazing life. Not only did he act opposite Laurence Olivier in one-on-one situation, but he was a paratrooper during the Second World War and jumped behind enemy lines. So I've learned all this because she sent me the biography, and I have sent it on to one publishing company, the only one that I know, and I'm hoping that they will have a positive reaction and want to get it published. I just wanted to add that because Mark was a really significant man. He was a terrific actor. And a good person, and I would love to see him enshrined in this way.
Wow, that's beautiful.
That's it.
Yeah, that's a great story. I thought he did a fantastic job in this episode, and really sold the idea for me that he was Spock's father. So there was no, doubt for me as the viewer that was believable. Both in his mannerisms, his performance, his stoicism, I thought was all on point for playing the Vulcan father of Spock. One person that also jumped out to me in this episode, Walter, was Majel Roddenberry playing, Nurse Chapel, and seeing her, how young she is in this episode. Any thoughts about, some of this early screen time for her as a character?
Say that. What was the question?
Do you have any kind of thoughts about?
What was the question?
Any thoughts about working with her at this moment in her career, and was there anything there?
No, not. I don't think we exchanged a line of dialogue. That's number one. I don't think I was in any scene with her. I may have been, but we didn't. As I said, we didn't exchange dialogue. She was a competent actress. It was, an awkward situation. Jean. I don't know if she and Jean had married by now, but they were certainly seeing each other. They were dating. I know that Major ultimately felt quite bitter towards our series, and made it known when she was on Next Gen that she thought that the superior effort was with the people of Next Gen. That's all I can say about that.
No, I wanted to ask you too, Walter, if you remember just shooting this episode, you had a really big role. There was no Sulu. There was no Scotty, mostly, generally speaking. And Chekhov is in charge of the bridge. I don't know if you remember shooting this particular episode 60-something years ago, but if you did, you might have thought, well, shit, look who's running the ship all of a sudden, reading that script and saying, oh, Scotty's got the, Chekhov's got the bridge now. Well, look at that. Do you remember any of this?
Well, I can tell you that, no, I didn't think that way. And I would tell you if I did.
Yeah, you would.
It was just another day on the series, another day of work. I was just pleased to be there, to have dialogue, to contribute as minimally as I did to the story. I don't even know if I've at this particular juncture, I was totally cognizant that George and Jimmy were not there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was doing the job that Chekhov had to do. My job as an actor. I didn't know those guys that well. I think this was like the 4th or 5th episode that we shot. Isn't that right? And George wasn't back yet. He was still doing Greek plays, I think. So, so no, I wasn't thinking about anybody else except doing my job and getting up and going to what I think was a science station when I left the Navigators Console. And I don't know what the hell it was that I was looking at, but I know I was reading off something from what I think it was a science station, because Mr. Spock used it as well. Used the same station.
I have another question about Walter. Some of your lines are off camera, just voiceover is essentially coming through the PA system, or so were those recorded on the set with the boom mic and everybody quiet while you record those voiceover lines, those off-screen lines, or were they recorded at a separate facility where they do post-production inserts on voices? Do you remember?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I don't think we went elsewhere. I think I just recorded them right where we were on the bridge, and then they used them as they chose. I'm almost positive we did not go to another location.
Okay.
That's really interesting. So I know you guys mentioned to me that you disagreed with what I had heard about this being a Thanksgiving episode. Well, what if I told you that I had proof that it's a Thanksgiving episode officially?
Okay.
Here is...
State your sources, please, sir.
This is undeniable proof here. It's a meme from the internet, and it says, "Happy Thanksgiving. Have fun dealing with all of your weird relatives," because they're all dressed funny.
That's funny.
So that's it. Case closed.
Yeah. That's undeniable. I mean, I took a look.
I don't remember accusing you of it not being a Thanksgiving episode. But if I did, and if you choose to believe that I did, so that you could make your point, then I apologize. I apologize.
Well, I think we all learned something today, Walter. Thank you.
Wow, yes, indeed.
What do you say, Rock?
No, that room was full of some really, they had to come up with a bunch of different costumes for a bunch of different kinds of aliens.
That's
so
where
I can only
went.
imagine. I imagine a lot of the, preparations went for that scene. And the other thing I was going to say is that when I rewatched this episode, I noticed that there were two relatively tall black guys that were in the opening scene of that when they start to pan across the room. They're wearing cloaks, these hooded cloaks. But if you really look closely, you can see those are some guys that I have probably played basketball with at some point. Because they're
back in the
relatively
60s,
tall.
right?
Yeah, some 60s brothers, yeah. But yeah, I thought that's cool. And then we saw the golden guys with their little colorful drinks. I thought they were, we saw some people dressed really disco-y with some blonde wigs on that were, cut in a certain way to make it look futuristic. So I thought that was a really well done as far as what they were working with at the time, trying to make a collection of different alien races. So, as far as that's concerned, I thought they accomplished that as far, the way the party looked active and a variety of different people. So it was colorful.
And it was generally two of each.
Yeah.
So the guy whose horn fell off, he was in disguise. He was not really of that blue race. Is that it?
Right. He was an Orion disguised as an Andorian. Oh, man, the trickery. So,
But Orions are green, though, right?
Right. Naturally. That's why he was able to that's why he had to powder his nose blue to be an Andorian who lost his antenna. But I was just kind of want to point out, like, maybe that's why their stunts weren't that great, is because all their budget went into all of this stuff, all of the actors, all of the wardrobe, all of the makeup, that, they just didn't have time. They're like, I don't know, just a quick, there we go. And then you're out.
I mean, it wasn't that difficult to add blood to Kirk's back or uniform.
I checked too.
He could have even reached back there, and you could see blood on his fingers. There was zero attempt to sell us on a deadly wound.
Right.
I know. Well, and I did check too. I immediately, because if he gets stabbed and then he immediately goes like this in the same shot, and you can see this, just put it there ahead of time. And then do the stab. I mean, whatever.
Or cut. You can cut to, a close up on, bloody / back, and then pull out again, and then we'll just assume that.
I was livid.
It was poor. It was poorly done, especially when you can see the back. You know what I mean? You can actually see as he's fighting, his back turns to the camera.
Well, we only have a few minutes left here. Walter, do you have any final thoughts on this episode? Like the fact that Kirk got to be topless again, like he is in every episode, basically.
And what is the question?
I guess there isn't one. No. Do you have any final thoughts on this before we go?
You guys are I see your faces, but I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, do you have any final thoughts on the episode?
What my rating? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or any final thoughts or ideas or anything you'd like to share.
Oh, well, I just want, the only final thought I have is fairly unimportant, but there was at least 4 shots that were shot from behind the navigator and the helmsman towards space. As you saw our backs in the foreground, and those were what we call library footage. They were shot at some point in the shooting schedule of the entire series, and then they were available to use whenever they didn't want to either set up that shot or they didn't want to pay the actor because we were not recognizable. I mean, I did a partial profile, and you would know it was me, but I don't think it was enough for them to feel they compelled to pay me if I wasn't going to be on the sound stage.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what we call library footage, and it was available to use. And if you're very astute and you watch very closely, you'll see the same exact shots in more than one episode.
That's interesting because I was in a sci-fi film that shall remain nameless, in which I was watching it. It was kind of like an early version, so maybe this changed later on, but I don't think so. I think but I was watching it, and I was on the bridge of a spaceship, and I'm sitting there at my spot. We're doing our thing, and I've got this guy next to me, and then it does a reverse shot where it's shooting us from behind, and you're seeing the screen just like this. And that was not me. it was not me, and it was not the dude next to me. And so I had that exact same thing where I was like, oh, I look very different from behind than I thought. And I was like, wait a second, the dude next to me turned into a lady. just for that over the shoulder shot. So that was kind of funny. So maybe that was their library shot or whatever it was.
Yeah. My
do you have the kind of thing, Sirach? Did you have that on your series, library footage?
They probably did for some of the main bridge shots, but not for the stuff that I did. Because none of the stuff I did. You had to get another kid. But one thing that jumped out to me, as far as my overall takeaway, one of the big things that I saw was the compassion and recollection of Spock's mother talking about Spock's upbringing as a multiracial child and the hurdles that he had to overcome being teased at school because of his ethnicity. And I feel like that's an issue that transcends, this episode and really relates to a lot of people who are biracial or multiracial and have to find themselves trying to fight for their identity or defend their identity against people who are critical of them. So that resonated with me. Is something that I think carries forward into Star Trek lore. My best friend on Deep Space Nine, Nog, also had to fight against certain kinds of prejudice and racism that he was experiencing in Starfleet Academy while he was working his way up through the ranks. And so, these aliens that are breaking the cultural norms of their species, like Worf and the Klingons, trying to enter into Starfleet and trying to find a way for themselves, are setting a lot of they're paving the way for future people like them to be able to be accepted and integrated into Starfleet. So I enjoyed hearing that story as well.
Yeah. Love it.
I became a fan of hers, of, what's her name? Anybody remember?
Which one?
The actress.
That played T'Pring? Or sorry, not T'Pring. Amanda. Yeah, Amanda. What was her name? I don't know. I'll look it up for you. Because I remember, I got it, but I forgot it.
I became a fan of hers because I used to watch Father Knows Best. And she played Robert Young's wife on Father Knows Best. And I thought she was, a very engaging presence there. So I thought she did a very nice job. I think she certainly fulfilled the requirements of playing Amanda. Is that what her name?
Yeah, Amanda.
In this episode.
It was Jane Wyatt. Jane Wyatt.
Yes.
Yeah. Father Knows Best. You got it. All right. Well, we're just about out of time here. And Walter, I think you mentioned that actually over the phone about Father Knows Best a few days ago. So also some people that know best or say they do are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman-Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Greg K. Wickstrom. He brings some nice chocolates with macadamia nuts in them. It's good to see him in Vegas. And of course, Jason Oken and Chris Garris from Corpus Christi, Texas. All right, that's it for us, everybody. Stick around for the free-for-all coming up next. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello.
And oftentimes Walter Koenig, but not right now. This is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Hello.
TJ Jackson Bay is out in Missouri, a.k.a. the bridge of the USS Discovery. Chris Garris has some blinds behind him. Allison Leach Hyde is wearing her Shakar Salot's favorite shirt. That is a cool shirt. Best team around. And the Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here. He was adjusting something.
Salutations.
All right. Oh, first things first. This one's important. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
His dad, I would say a 7-7.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
I know what it is. So I'm not going to say
7-1.
7-8. 7-8. The answer is 8.5.
Whoa!
Wow. Wow.
Closest without going over goes to TJ, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
You outbid me.
I thought there was a non-appearance mention for Scotty.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But Walter said he heard Scotty's voice. Did we hear Scotty's? I didn't hear it either.
I
don't remember hearing it.
I think he heard Chekhov's voice.
I think he heard Chekhov's voice because I know the part where Captain Kirk is talking to Chekhov on
Happens
the
a couple
comms.
times. Yeah.
Yes.
And at first I thought it was Scotty, but it was Chekhov.
Okay.
Correct.
So that might have been
and he even says
confusion.
Chekhov.
Chekhov.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is a non-appearance mention for Scotty for sure. Do we have any others?
I don't think from what I saw, I don't remember any more.
All right.
That
would
whole
be
planet
his second.
Coridon got a non-appearance mention.
Yes. That would
what
be
about
his second one.
Did we ever see Salek, the teddy bear?
We do. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a kind of animal. It's not a specific character, though. It's
Right.
like a
Not played by
bear,
a person.
like a
Yeah.
bear or a wolf. But they did
Don't they
talk about it.
Yeah,
So,
don't they
yeah,
talk? Well, they talked
yeah,
about
you're
this
right.
a
Had a
lot.
pet. Just,
And it
Yeah,
didn't
and-
appear.
mention the
Yeah,
name.
they
Well, it's
showed
appearing
it.
now on Allison's shirt.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
a
And the-
voice actor did play him.
Yeah, it's on the animated series.
Right.
I'll
Voice
say
actor,
yeah.
yay!
So we got it
Animated
now.
series.
I think
Yep.
I think Homer would approve of that one.
I
I
think
think
he
so,
would.
too.
I think he would go.
Oh, come on now. We're talking
Yes,
about
that's a
Uncle
noun.
Dale.
That's what
I
he
was
would
gonna
do.
say
Child.
Yes, that's
Yes.
Okay. Some kinds of or some sorts of Dark Lord?
Indeed, we got 2 of them this time around. Try to do it under the auspicious eye of Homer Frizzell here. First of all, Uhura says, Captain, I picked up some sort of signal, just a few symbols, nothing intelligible. And then later on, much later on, Joseph, I guess one of the security officers says, security here, we had to stun the Andorian. He had some sort of transceiver.
Yep.
yeah.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Excellent. Melissa Longo, there's Homer. Good job, TJ.
Oh,
Melissa Longo, will you please get us started off on the right track and tell us what you thought of this particular episode?
Yeah. I'm going to have to be honest and say I tried to watch this last night and it did not hold my attention whatsoever. I chalk it up to social media and being online all the time where I get distracted easily and but I tried again today while I was eating breakfast, and which was much more to keeping my focus than working on other stuff. And I definitely liked it better the second time around, the second watch around. The thing I appreciate about Star Trek is how ahead of its time it was and I'm going to keep repeating this over and over again because I'm always blown away by how ahead of its time it was in its storytelling, in the subject matter that it deals with, specifically Spock and him being half Vulcan, half human. They're dealing with a topic that rarely gets talked about, and that's, mixy, biracial children. And they're doing that in the 60s. And that is pretty, and talking about it in a way where it's talking about his loneliness and is talking about the way he feels apart from the societies he's supposed to belong to, but doesn't really belong to either of them. So I love that. And I love that they explore this from the beginning. And I enjoy seeing the establishment of the Tellarites and the Andorians and how they're part of the Federation with the Vulcans, the founding members of the Federation, the Vulcans and the humans. That's so fun too. I have a few questions that I'll leave for things left unsaid that made me go, I don't know about that. But two things I have to mention. One, they're both about Jane Wyatt. One is she reminded me of Allison Leach Hyde, an older version of Allison Leach Hyde. I see her and I was like, this beautiful woman, that she's beautiful and mature, and she's got this, this present that reminded me of Allison. So I thought of you the whole way through. And then also Jane Wyatt has a connection to Star Trek that most people, I don't think, realize. And I just discovered this before the recording. She was in a movie called Amityville Horror.
Okay.
What is it called? Amityville Horror, The Evil Escapes. which also stars another Star Trek alum
Brent Spiner.
and is relevant to the Seventh Rule because Aaron Eisenberg was in that movie too. How
Excellent.
cool is that?
Wow.
Super cool.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So Jane White, of course, played Amanda. Everybody knows. Well, great stuff. Thank you very much, Melissa. You'll have to tell us in Things Left Unsaid what you had for breakfast that turned you around and made you enjoy this episode much more. I bet there was fruit involved. All right.
Yes.
I know my Melissa breakfast only because she posts them like every other day. And I'm always like, that looks like a good breakfast. All right.
Breakfast is fun. It's
It
delicious.
Yes.
You know what else is fun?
Right.
TJ, Jackson Bay out in Missouri. What do you got for us, TJ?
Lots of fun. That's why I'm the party going. I got a lot to say about this episode, and to kind of follow on Melissa's comments about exploring this biracial nature of Spock and how he has to deal with that. I really enjoy Leonard Nimoy's performance. He did a lot with just his facial expressions. and I think he said so much with just that, like his physical movement and his reactions, and especially in his scenes with Jane Wyatt, where you can see the human in him, like it wants to come out, but his guard is just so far up that he won't let it. But you can see it in his eyes, and I think Leonard acted that so well. And I think to Melissa's point, it speaks volumes about the struggle of people that do have that experience in real life and feel like they don't belong in either quote category or box that we like to check off. I said check off. That's funny. So yeah, I think Leonard just knocked that out of the park. But I also wanted to mention the very first thing that I saw, and I used to take this for granted when I was a kid, are the names that come up on the screen, at the beginning of the episode. And you see DC Fontana. Well, that's Dorothy Fontana wrote this episode. And it amazes me to learn so much, years later about, those screens or those names on the screen that I just kind of took for granted that are people that put their heart and soul into this show and made it happen. And it continues to pain me that she didn't receive her due recognition at the time, but I'm glad that she's able to receive it now, just because of her gender. So I'm grateful that recognition is bestowed upon her now fully for who she is and what she brought to the show. I found myself also appreciating Mark Leonard's performance. And as I'm watching him, I can see elements that James Frame pulled from Mark Leonard's performance to bring Sarek to life in Star Trek Discovery. There we go. And it was just really refreshing to watch him again. I always enjoyed this episode and being shocked that these were Spock's parents and nobody knew, even as they're standing right there and being introduced. Spock's like, "Yo, these are my parents," and they're like, "What? No, get out of here." There were, a couple of lines that I appreciated when Spock was talking to the Andorian. He's standing outside of the brig and talking to the ambassador, and they're trying to figure out, like, why did this murder happen? Why did this guy, attack Captain Kirk? Before they figure out who he really is. And the Andorian tells him, perhaps you should forget logic. Devote yourself to motivations of passion and gain. Those are reasons for murder. And so, again, Spock is fighting against his nature to try to apply logic to, to everything, to solve every issue and every problem. And, of course, we see that magnified in how he deals with the issue with his father, to the point that, and I think this conversation really stayed with Spock, because when he's talking to Amanda in his quarters later, and she's trying to convince him to go, save your father, and somebody else can command the ship. Well, Spock says, I can't do that because that's personal gain. And my duty, doesn't allow me to do that. My logic doesn't allow me to do personal gain. So I think he took what the Andorian ambassador said and really took it to heart in the opposite direction. He's like, no, I got to go even harder at logic because of this gain. And that's emotion stuff. And that's why somebody died, and I can't let everybody else die, by not being logical. And I can't give in to passion and gain. So, I really appreciated that in the writing and that in the performance. And, just again, this is Spock's episode, and Leonard Nimoy knocks it out of the park. He acts it well. The story's great. Thank you, Dorothy Fontana. I have so much more to say. I'll leave that for things left unsaid and let someone else speak now.
All right. I got things for things left unsaid.
I might just keep talking.
Thanks very much. TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri. All right. Chris Garris is here. We were watching him drive home. It was kind of fun. What'd you think of this one?
No, I liked the episode. This is actually the first time I've watched it. What I did get to watch of it today. Yeah, haven't made it all through TOS yet. It does have a good. Does show how Spock has to deal with being his human side and his Vulcan side, and how they always compete, even till now, even to where we're at today with Star Trek. But some stuff when I was watching this, though, it kind of surprised me a little bit. I was like, the way Sarek actually, I felt like the way he, I'd say, treated his wife at times.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't age well today, because it was like, wife, come here, and she does, and all of that. I'm glad that I enjoyed the episode, but it just seemed like they were, I was surprised at the attitudes, though, also, even though we still have that even in today's society with, when a father and a son, or a child per se, disagree on something, they went 18 years without talking. And you can see the Vulcans, even though they say they have no emotions, that to me felt like an emotional response to him not, joining, going the Vulcan Science Directive. But I also did like how they did tie it. Well, we didn't tie it, but 2009 tied back into Spock's childhood. And, they pulled that from, I think, a little bit from this episode when, Kirk was asking Amanda about Spock's childhood and how did he, how was it? And he did get picked on because he was only half human and half Vulcan, so he wasn't fully there. So I do have some more things left unsaid, but overall, I mean, it was a good episode. I don't know. I just kind of felt there were things that, again, didn't age too well for today's society, especially the way the structure, the hierarchy of it.
Yeah, especially because the Vulcans are supposed to be like enlightened, and they're ahead.
Correct.
They're ahead of
Us.
humans. Yeah, but
and that's like, they always, when you go back to Enterprise, they always preach how they're enlightened, that we don't do this, we don't do that. Well, yes, you do.
Thanks very much, Chris Dallas Garris, that is, Corpus Christi, of course. Allison Leach Hyde is here. She already knows. She's unmuting herself. What do you think of this one?
I like this episode. But yes, I mean, that little bit of how, again, it's the 60s, it shows its age, where Amanda is kind of treated wife a lot. But I love the scene between her and Sarek talking about how you shouldn't tease Spock in front of his crewmates. I loved that scene. You know, as a mom, do I do gentle ribbing to my children? Yes, I do. But I also don't have a Vulcan child. Neither of my children are very stoic. So, you know, they'll rib me back. But I did love that Sarek is like, no, as who he is, not just because he's my son, you shouldn't have done that in front of his crewmates. So I love that scene. I thought those actors worked very well together, and it was a joy to watch them act together. So that was kind of a high point for me. And some of it was weirdly choppy in how it was edited together. Like we had the great sick bay scene where Bones is sitting here just completely working on, like, come on, Spock, I need you to do this. Let's do this. Let's figure this out. And we have this lovely scene, and then it just goes straight to a fight scene. Like there's no like transition. We're just now on the floor with an Andorian, and there are blades everywhere. I'm like, oh, that's really, really distracting. Like, how did we get here? So, you know, I thought that could have been done a little better, maybe. I loved all the colors in the episode. I say it all the time. I loved the food. Did the gold dudes have like little colored marshmallows so they would float to the top of their drinks? Like I was like completely in on that. Maybe it was because I was eating lunch, so I kind of zoned in on the food. Like what is So loved that too. Let's see what else. The shade of Sarek going, I would like somebody else to give me a tour was wonderful. I can see why Mark Leonard got more fan mail than anyone else did for the next 2 weeks after this episode aired. He was amazing and completely makes the episode. And yeah, let's see, Dorothy Fontana, DC, as we like to call her. Pretty much this was her original script. Like this is what she wrote, small tweaks, except for one scene she had nothing to do with. And that was written by, we're assuming Gene came in and wrote the Kirk and Amanda scene. I don't know why, but it was added to it. She wasn't particularly happy that it was added because she thought that was something a mother shouldn't say to, you know, her child's boss. But it was in there. And this is probably one of DC's favorite episodes she ever wrote. So I thought that should make everyone's vote for this a little higher because our original queen of Star Trek liked this episode and was super proud of it. So I love it. I also love that they got to play possum with the ship. I thought that was great. I'm like, just turn everything off for just a second. Okay. And my final thing that got me was in the beginning is, how come they're not all lizards on the ship that was going warp 10?
Yes. Yes. And there was nothing really mentioned about it. They just said warp 10 and then moved on. But yeah, the fruit and the food, totally with you on that. The gold dudes that were like completely distracting me. They were so much more interesting than whatever was going on behind them.
Did you notice that they were wearing some pretty interesting headgear?
Yes. Yes, they were.
No, I didn't
Brian's
notice.
thinking about it.
I didn't notice.
But TJ has normalized it.
Oh, they were wearing fezzes.
Yes.
Very nice. We should have mentioned that. We're bearing the lead.
Yeah.
Speaking of bearing the lead, Chris Saylot McGee is here. Saylot V, am I right? What do you think of this one?
Yeah. Say a lot, McGee. Come on.
Well, I have been described as a fat teddy bear, so hey, it's a Paul Fitz. Melissa, you are not alone. I also had a little bit of a difficult time keeping my attention on the episode, but in my case, I was definitely distracted at the time. So I echo everyone else's observations regarding the actors' performances and the attention on the loneliness that children of two species or races often deal with. I will also piggyback off of what Allison said about the colorful food. Sometimes I feel like the original series was being pushed to promote color television at the time. So they made every effort to make everything's so colorful. Even the ice cubes or marshmallows, as Allison observed, are so vibrant in this episode. Also, with this episode and the episode titled Sarek in the Next Generation, I realized that there have now been 2 times Sarek has been on an Enterprise. And both times he has been accused of something awful. Murder in this episode and Bendai syndrome in Sarek. No wonder he never stepped on an Enterprise ever again. Minor nitpick. You could tell the budget was getting a little tighter in this season because, as Jason has observed in previous free-for-alls, the music cues were being recycled from previous episodes. I could definitely hear the music from the Doomsday Machine during the climactic battle of this episode, for example.
Dun, 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 dun.
Exactly. And I've got a few other thoughts. I'll save those for things left unsaid. So please become a patron if you aren't already to check those out. And I'll jump to my memorable quote of the episode. McCoy saying what I'm feeling right now. Well, what do you know? I finally got the last word.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Now, of course, we could just bring on Carrie Schwent right now to have the last word, but wouldn't that be fun? So let's see. What do we have here?
Oh, Crafty Bear's here.
Oh, wait, but I'm here.
Surprise!
Carrie Schwent, you're just in time. We're just about to end the free-for-all. Any thoughts on this episode? Marvel.
Oh, yeah, this is a fun one. It's definitely one that the whole men are universally stubborn no matter what planet they live on. The whole parent-child relationship is just as fraught no matter what planet you live on. I love that.
I feel
Scene at
overly
the end.
generalized.
Well, I've known mostly stubborn men in my life, so that's where that comes from. But my favorite scene is at the end with Bones, where he's zip it with Kirk, and yeah, the grin on his face at the end is absolutely the best part of the entire episode. I enjoy it so much. And I don't know, I sent Melissa the haiku that I wrote, but I don't know if she read it or not, but I do have it.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, let me unfold my paper with my gloves on here. Bear with me. Okay.
Crafty Bear with her.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. Human and Vulcan. Spock's blood is green like Sarek's. The son saves his dad.
Oh.
Excellent.
Sweet.
And I found the woman that played his mother is the second episode in a row having an episode with someone from Father Knows Best on it. She played the mother, if my research is correct.
So she doesn't
And
know
I also
best.
And I also read somewhere else that supposedly at some convention or another, she mentioned that Spock's human name is Harold. And I kind of hope that's true because I kind of love it.
All right.
He's
I
more
learned
of
something.
he's more of an Egon than a Harold, I think.
Egon works.
For
Well,
sure.
Jake's final take, everybody. Final thoughts on this episode, Sirach.
Yeah, I have some final thoughts. Check with Memory Alpha. It turns out Spock's dad's last name is Lofton. Sarek Lofton. Who's your daddy? I think this is a great episode as far as establishing a lot of themes that we see being recycled over the years in Star Trek. One of those things would be, for example, we see the opening on the dress uniforms and welcoming diplomats. That's something we see all the time. Murder mystery, something we see all the time, something that's recycled. We also see a mysterious vessel that's unexplainable, an unidentified object. That's something that we always see. So, a lot of these things I enjoy thematically, and watching them in their original form, in their original state, is fun to see. Um, I enjoyed the politics of the crew and the bridge as they were trying to find a way to basically dethrone Spock from command, and to watch them go through that kind of gamesmanship and politics, essentially. I'm going to pretend like I'm okay so that I can get Spock to step down, and then I'm going to put McCoy in charge, but then I'll change my mind and not put McCoy in charge because I have other things to do. So the whole gamesmanship of that, I thought, is great to see the crew members have these discussions and say, hey, what's best for the interest of our survival and the crew, and whatever it takes to execute that, we will do. So you saw McCoy play along as the doctor and say, damn it, I cleared him. You let him, he's fine. He's perfectly fine, in command.
That's pretty good.
So great gamesmanship. I enjoy that. I did also too like the fact that his mom was like, in a tough position, essentially, between these two very stubborn people who would not like give up any ground on their position. And I really felt sorry for her, having to be an emotional person amidst unemotional people. And that's a difficult thing. I like to see young Major Roddenberry as Nurse Chapel, looking beautiful and elegant in her nurse uniform. I thought that was great. Kirk had his shirt off for a moment.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, shirtless Kirk.
Wow.
Right, take your shirt off.
I know.
Make yourself comfortable on the stage, on the ship. So I like to see that. That was a little different. Love to see that Chekhov had a lot of dialogue, a lot of responsibility in this episode. Very great use of Walter in this particular episode. And how ironic that the antenna was an antenna.
Yes. Very
I
good.
mean, hello. I was like, wait, that's good. That's a good one, Andorian antenna. Okay, so that's all DC Fontana and her writing. I thought the language was great because I felt the characters were voiced with their own personalities and their own way. And essentially, now going back to the idea of Babel, which is the biblical theme of everybody speaking a different language and not being able to communicate with each other. I felt like that theme was accomplished by everybody in this episode having their own desired outcome and results that they were pushing for, right? The Tellarites were like, what are you going to decide? The Andorians had their own, what they wanted. You see the Vulcan diplomat, Sarek had his own kind of agenda. He wasn't communicating that he was sick. Spock wasn't communicating some of his feelings and what he was emotional. So it was almost like everybody having their individual itinerary and how can we accomplish these things individually and not really communicating well. And I think that's where the whole Babel, reference comes from. You saw the frustrations with McCoy when he says, I'm glad somebody finally asked me a question. It was like, all you guys, like, you guys are all speaking from your own perspective, but nobody's like, we're not working together here. And so I thought that was really well spoken for me. I love the Gold guys. They made me feel really Willy Wonka. I was looking for. I was like, is Willy Wonka? Because it felt great.
Doop-a-dee-doo.
Yeah. And also, my final shout out is to the wardrobe people that really had to design wardrobe and makeup, who had to design different looks for all of these different people that were in those shots. They had to do the dress uniforms. They had Amanda's beautiful kind of garbs that she had multiple wardrobe changes throughout the episode. You saw Sarek with multiple wardrobe changes that I thought were great. And yeah, just the colorful wardrobe changes, the different makeup looks. I thought that the Tellurite's makeup job was just phenomenal. It really looked great, very believable, almost scary to a degree, but just really good. And I loved Amanda's high collar dress with the cashmere kind of cloak vest that she was wearing. It was just a really nice, well done episode. And yeah, I can see why I would get an 8.5 because I do feel the pace was relatively on. It didn't have many moments where it was too slow. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed this episode a lot, and I do believe, as TJ said, that DC Fontana is undercredited for the amount of contributions she made into the world of science fiction.
Awesome. Great stuff. All right, everybody. That's it for us. So thank you to Carrie for showing up eventually out in what looks like freezing ass Chicago. Looks very cold there.
No, Milwaukee.
Milwaukee had a snow day.
Yeah.
Thank you to Carrie, Chris McGee, Allison Leach Hyde, Chris Garris, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Melissa Longo, for myself, Sirach, Melissa, and Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you next time. But until then, always remember the 7th rule.